You still got that old guy doing deliveries." The young shift manager laughed, shaking his head, unaware that the man he was mocking had just become the center of a story that would change everything. Not just for their store, but for the entire company. One undercover boss, one simple order, one unexpected gesture that turned into a company-wide awakening. If you were the boss, what would you do? Fire the arrogant manager? Reward the humble old man? Share his story with thousands? Or all of the above? Because sometimes the smallest bag holds the biggest truth. It had been a long time since Matthew Quinn, founder and CEO of Brickfire Pizza, had touched the front lines of his own empire. 13 years ago, he'd stood behind a flour-dusted counter, sliding pizzas into ovens in a rented strip mall, dreaming of one store becoming 10. 10 became 100. The 100 became a brand. And somewhere in all of that growth, something began to slip. He didn't see it at first, not through the polished quarterly reports or glowing investor calls. Sales were healthy, market expansion was on track, but something quieter, deeper had started to rot. The emails from customers became less about food and more about how they were made to feel. Rushed, ignored, disrespected. Delivery complaints started stacking up. Not about lateness, but about tone, cold drivers, rude managers, robotic service, no warmth, no soul. Brickfire had never been built to be perfect. It was built to be human. But lately, Matthew felt like they were losing that. So he made a decision no consultant or executive would recommend. He went undercover. The plan was simple. He shaved the beard that had become part of his public image. He dyed his salt and pepper hair to a dull brown. Thrift store jeans, a faded hoodie, and a pair of off-brand sneakers completed the transformation. And just like that, he was no longer Matthew Quinn, the man behind the brand. He was just Mike Ramsey, a quiet renter in a bland suburban neighborhood just outside Columbus. He rented a modest single-level home through a burner account. No fancy decor, no distractions, just 4 walls, a recliner, and a microwave that didn't quite work. A camera crew, posing as a documentary team filming local dining habits, followed from a careful distance. Their presence explained with scripted excuses and half smiles. At 6:07 p.m. on a rainy Friday night, he sat on the edge of that recliner, thumb hovering over his phone. From the Brickfire app, he placed an order from one of the company's most underperforming locations. A store that, according to regional data, had the lowest customer return rate and one of the highest complaint volumes. He added a medium, gluten-free crust with extra cheese, light sauce, a side of garlic buffalo wings, and a soda. He didn't overtip. Just a modest, fair amount. Enough to be polite, not enough to be noticed. Then he clicked place order and waited. What he didn't know, what no one knew at that moment, was that this order, this ordinary Friday night dinner, would turn into something unforgettable, something that had nothing to do with crust or cheese. Because at the other end of that transaction was a man no one had seen clearly in years, and tonight he was about to be seen. Back at the store, the kitchen was already buzzing with the hum of printers and the slap of dough on stainless steel. The staff worked fast, efficient, but detached. There were no greetings, no smiles. Boxes were stamped and slid down the line like an assembly plant. The pride that once defined these kitchens had given way to a rush-to-close energy. In the corner, the shift manager, mid-20s, earbuds in one ear, glanced up at the screen. Another ticket came through. "Gluten-free?" he scoffed. "Bet it's one of those picky health freaks." No one laughed, but no one corrected him either. And then he muttered a line that would end up haunting him far beyond his shift. "Is that old guy still doing deliveries? Damn, how's he not dead yet?" No one responded, but a few exchanged glances. The old guy, his name was Ernie, had become part of the store's background noise. Always there, always quiet, always taking the routes no one wanted. Some thought he just needed the money. Others joked he lived at the store. No one really asked why he stayed, and no one had any idea who he was about to deliver to. Rain tapped against the back door of the Brickfire outlet like a slow, lazy metronome. The store clock blinked 6:23 p.m. Inside, the air was thick with impatience. It wasn't outright chaos. The kitchen wasn't exactly falling apart, but there was a hollowness to everything, like everyone was just doing time. Orders were flying in fast, like they always did on Friday nights. Boxes slid from prep to oven to driver handoffs. Wings were slopped into containers. Toppings tossed without care. Soda bottles sat sweating. Beside napkins, no one folded anymore. The shift manager, Tyler, stood near the prep board, with his phone half hidden behind a pizza box, texting between barks at his team. "Yo, who's taking this gluten-free freak show?" he said, holding up the new ticket. Guy added extra cheese, no sauce, wings, soda, classic picky loser. A teen near the dough station chuckled nervously, but kept his head down. "Hey," Tyler snapped again, raising his voice slightly. "Where's old man Ernie?" "In the back," someone muttered, not bothering to hide their irritation. Tyler rolled his eyes. "Of course he is. Probably counting his social security in the broom closet again." A few snorts echoed, low and uncomfortable. No one really hated Ernie, not exactly. But he was an odd fixture. Too old for the job. Too quiet to connect with. Too invisible to matter. He didn't joke around with them. He didn't hang out after hours. He didn't complain about the work. He just showed up, did his job, and left. Most of them had no idea where he lived, or why he still delivered pizzas at nearly 70 years old. And frankly, none of them cared enough to ask. Out, back, under the yellow hum of a flickering exit light, Ernie zipped up his paper-thin jacket and rubbed the ache from his knees. The rain hadn't let up, and it always made his joints tighter than usual. His beat-up beige sedan was parked just out of view, dented fender, mismatched hubcap, and all. He had just returned from a delivery that stretched out past the far ridge to a mobile home park where the lights flickered inside worn-down trailers. The lady who answered the door had called him Sir and handed him a thank you note her grandson scribbled in crayon. That had made him smile. As he stepped back inside the store, the familiar wall of pizza grease and fryer heat hit his face. Tyler's voice cut through the kitchen like it always did. Too loud, too sharp. "Hey, Ernie, you've got a weird one. Gluten-free crust, wings, soda. Tip looks average, so don't get excited." Ernie gave a single nod, not fazed. "I got it," he said softly, his voice steady but almost drowned out by the sounds of timers and clanging metal. One of the new hires muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. "Man, he's still doing this at his age. That's sad." Tyler didn't correct him. He just smirked. No one noticed the slight shift in Ernie's eyes. He didn't flinch, didn't scold. He just walked to the staging area, checked the address twice, and began preparing for the run. Before sealing the bag, he did something he always did. Something no one ever asked him to do. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside it was a single, slightly misshapen peanut butter cookie, wrapped in plastic, tied, with a bit of string. A small handwritten note sat on top, in careful cursive. "Thanks for your order. Hope your evening is warm and full of good things." His granddaughter, Lena, had made the cookies that morning. She always did when she had time before school. She was 16 now, brilliant, fierce, still healing. After her parents, Ernie's daughter and son-in-law, died in a car crash 6 years ago, Ernie stepped in, no questions asked. He gave up retirement, took on whatever work he could. Pizza delivery paid little, but enough. Enough to keep Lena in school, in books, in warm clothes. Enough to give her the quiet stability no child should have to fight for. He didn't put cookies in every bag, just the ones going to homes that looked lonely. Places that reminded him of what it felt like to miss someone. Tonight's order, a gluten-free crust to a rental address on the edge of the district, felt like one of those. He placed the pizza carefully in the thermal bag. The wings next. The soda. Then, with the gentleness of a man holding something more than food, he tucked the cookie and napkin beside the box. Tyler never saw any of that. He was too busy arguing with someone about the Bluetooth speaker in the back. Ernie didn't say goodbye, didn't crack a joke. He just stepped out into the rain, walked to his car, and started the engine. The sedan coughed once, then turned over. One headlight flickered to life. As he pulled away from the store, no one noticed. No one waved. No one, except a hidden documentary crew 2 blocks away, watching from behind steamed-up glass as the oldest driver on the roster made his way toward a customer he had no idea was also the man who'd built the company from scratch, and who hadn't felt truly seen in years. The porch light flickered to life just as the old sedan pulled up. Rain had eased into a steady mist, beading on the windshield like whispers. Inside the rental house, Matthew stood near the front window, peeking through the blinds like a man, watching more than just a delivery arrive. He saw the car first, beige, worn, barely holding together. One headlight was out. The bumper had a crack that looked like it had been duct-taped at some point. But what caught his attention wasn't the car. It was the man who stepped out of it. There was no rush in his movements, no phone in his hand, no loud music blaring through the open door. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Not because he had to, but because he still cared to get it right. Ernie adjusted his cap, opened the back door, and lifted the insulated bag with a kind of reverence, like it held something precious. He checked the receipt again, then walked slowly up the narrow walkway, avoiding the puddles, head slightly down as the mist turned his grey curls damp. Matthew opened the door just before the knock landed, and for a moment, both men just looked at each other. "Good evening, sir," Ernie said, voice calm and warm, the way a grandfather speaks when he means it. "1 gluten-free, extra cheese, light sauce, wings, and a soda. Hope I got that right." Matthew nodded, taken slightly aback by how gentle the man was. "Yeah, that's perfect." Ernie smiled, a soft one that didn't try too hard, the kind that comes from someone who no longer needs to prove anything. He carefully removed the items from the bag, handing each over as if it were a gift, not just a transaction. Then, just before he turned to leave, he paused, almost forgot. He reached into the delivery pouch and pulled out a folded napkin, slightly creased. "Something I like to include for new customers," he said. Inside was a homemade cookie, misshapen, wrapped in cling film, tied with a bit of blue string, and on top, written in tidy cursive, "Hope your evening is warm and full of good things." Matthew stared at it for a moment, completely still. He hadn't received anything handmade in years. Not a gift without strings, not a gesture with no transaction behind it. He looked up slowly. "You made this?" "My granddaughter did," Ernie said, eyes twinkling. "She bakes a few every week. I tuck them in when I feel like someone might need a little extra warmth. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed. He said it with no agenda, no performance, just truth." There was a pause, not an awkward one, but the kind of silence that feels full, like both people know they're standing in something that matters. Matthew cleared his throat. "You been doing this long?" Ernie nodded. "Longer than I planned to, that's for sure. Retired from the post office a while back. Thought I'd slow down. But life had other ideas." He didn't offer the rest of the story, not yet. He didn't need to. The quiet in his voice said enough, that this job wasn't about money or boredom. It was about survival, and maybe something more. "You like it?" Matthew asked, gesturing toward the rain. "The job, I mean." Ernie gave a soft chuckle. "Wouldn't be out here if I didn't. It keeps me moving. And honestly, it gives me a reason to smile most days. Not everyone says thank you, but some do. That's enough for me." Matthew looked down at the napkin in his hand. The ink had bled slightly from the moisture in the air. The string was a little crooked. The cookie wasn't perfect. But the gesture, it felt like the most honest thing he'd been handed in years. He didn't know what to say. Not as a CEO, not as a customer, just as a man. I'm not used to this, he said finally. Getting something extra, something real. Ernie shrugged. Doesn't take much to be kind. That's what I tell my granddaughter. Especially these days. People are so busy surviving they forget to give. Matthew nodded slowly. Yeah, they do. Ernie tipped his cap. Well, I won't keep you. You enjoy your meal, sir. And with that, he turned and walked back down the narrow path, his shoes splashing through the edge of a puddle, never missing a step. The sedan door creaked as it opened. Then he drove off, back into the quiet, rainy night. Inside the house, Matthew stood still, the cookie still in his hand, the napkin pressed between his fingers. He didn't sit, didn't eat. The pizza box remained untouched on the coffee table. The soda began to sweat a ring onto the wood. Something inside him was different now. Something small had cracked open. The part of him that used to believe in the little things. The part that remembered why he started all this in the first place. Not to build a brand, but to build something that mattered. The rain had picked up again, pattering against the windows in slow rhythm as Matthew sat silently, the pizza untouched in front of him. He still held the napkin, now slightly crumpled at the edges, the note smudged from the moisture in his fingers. He must have read it 10 times already. Hope your evening is warm and full of good things. It was such a simple sentence. No branding, no coupon code, no company slogan, just warmth. A sentence that felt more honest than half the marketing campaigns he'd signed off on in the last 5 years. He thought of his own father for a moment, a welder who worked until his hands were permanently calloused, who told him once that being a man meant showing up for people even when they didn't see you. That kind of man, he realized, was rare. And tonight, one had just walked up to his door and handed him a cookie. He didn't want to let it end there. He grabbed his jacket, called the film crew quietly, and gave them one instruction: keep back, keep rolling. By the time he found Ernie, the old sedan was parked at a corner gas station a few blocks away, under the flickering glow of a rusted-out sign. Ernie stood at pump 2, one hand on the handle, the other rubbing his shoulder. He looked smaller now, not just from age, from the weight he carried that no one seemed to notice. Matthew approached slowly, pulling up the hood of his sweatshirt against the rain. Hey, he called softly. Ernie looked up, surprised, but not startled. Did I forget something? He asked, wiping his hands on a towel. Was the soda missing? Matthew shook his head. No, not at all. It was perfect. He paused, trying to find the right words. Actually, I just wanted to thank you. For the cookie, the note, for how you treated me. You didn't know who I was, and you were still kind. Ernie gave a modest smile, brushing it off. I just try to make people's day a little easier. It's not much, but it's something. That's how I see it. Matthew nodded. Then he stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. Do you mind if I ask why you're still doing this? I mean, most people your age would have hung up the car keys a long time ago. Ernie leaned against the car door, glancing toward the convenience store, then back at him. Most probably would, yeah. But life didn't quite go that way for me. He paused, as if weighing whether to say the rest, then decided to. My wife passed 10 years ago. Cancer. 42 years together. His voice softened. She used to joke that I could deliver anything but a vacation. Matthew smiled gently. Then a few years after that, my daughter, well, she got sick, real fast, one of those sudden, cruel things. Left behind my granddaughter, she was only 10. So I stepped in. Didn't even think about it, just took the wheel. He looked down, fidgeting with his car keys. Lena's 16 now, smart as anything. Wants to be a teacher. This job, it helps. It covers what needs covering. Keeps me from sitting at home wondering what if. And to be honest, I still like it. I like being useful. He said it all without a trace of self-pity. Like a man who had made peace with the weight on his back, because the love he carried was heavier and worth it. Matthew's throat tightened. His hands were buried deep in his coat pockets, fingers gripping the lining. There was a long silence. Only the sound of rain hitting the car roof, only the buzzing of the gas station light above them. Then Matthew exhaled slowly and said, "There's something I need to tell you." Ernie raised an eyebrow, his kind eyes narrowing just slightly. "I'm not just a customer," Matthew said. "My name's not Mike Ramsey." Ernie's brows furrowed. "My real name is Matthew Quinn. I'm the founder and CEO of Brickfire Pizza." The air between them seemed to thicken. For a moment, Ernie didn't move, didn't speak. His face shifted. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something else. Not awe, not fear, something closer to concern. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. "Was it the cookie? I know we're not really supposed to add things to orders. I just thought—" Matthew stepped forward, shaking his head. No, Ernie. You didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right, more than right." Ernie looked down, visibly trying to process it all. "You're really him. The guy. In the commercials. The suit." Matthew smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's me. Been a long time since I wore a name tag, though." Ernie let out a soft chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned." And then, still slightly uncertain, he asked, "So, why me?" "Because," Matthew said, his voice full, steady, honest, "you reminded me why I started this company in the first place." They stood there in the rain, two men from completely different worlds, one who had built something millions consumed, and one who had kept its soul alive without anyone noticing. And for the first time in years, Matthew Quinn felt like he'd just been delivered something that wasn't food or data or numbers. He'd been delivered truth. 2 weeks had passed since the night Matthew followed Ernie to that gas station in the rain. Since the moment a man who still delivered pizzas at 70 slipped a cookie into a stranger's bag, not knowing he'd handed it to the very man who built the company logo printed on his shirt. The footage had been reviewed. The team had seen it all. The careless kitchen jokes, the smirks, the sarcasm. And then, the moment Ernie carefully folded that napkin and placed it in the thermal bag, with nothing to gain and no one to impress, just quiet goodness. Even the most hardened producers had teared up watching Ernie speak about his granddaughter, about losing his wife, his daughter, his peace, but never losing his will to keep showing up. Not out of obligation, out of love. And Matthew knew this story wasn't meant to be hidden behind a boardroom curtain. It deserved light. He didn't just call a meeting. He called for a moment. In the company's sleek, modern headquarters, a dozen senior leaders gathered in a room usually reserved for quarterly forecasting. But this wasn't about numbers. Today, no spreadsheets, no charts, just a screen and a story. Matthew stood at the front, arms crossed, the room quiet behind him as the video played. Some executives leaned forward. Others sank into their chairs. By the time the cookie appeared, a few were already blinking faster than usual. When the screen faded to black, Matthew spoke, not like a CEO, but like a man who had finally remembered why he started it all. "We built something big," he said, voice steady. "But somewhere in the expansion, we started mistaking speed for service, systems for souls, metrics for meaning, and it took a man most of us never noticed to remind me of what we lost." He paused, then added, "And what we can still become." 1 week later, Ernie and Lena were invited to headquarters under the impression they were part of a small employee appreciation event. Ernie dressed in his Sunday best, the same jacket he'd worn to his wife's memorial. Lena wore a second-hand blazer and a shy smile, clutching her grandfather's arm like she always did when she felt overwhelmed. But when they stepped into the atrium, the sight stopped them cold. There wasn't just a staff meeting. There was a gathering. Dozens of employees, managers, regional directors, even kitchen crew flown in from other cities. At the front of the room stood Matthew, no longer in disguise, and behind him, a brand new gleaming delivery vehicle with "Thank you, Ernie" written subtly near the tail light. Lena's mouth opened slightly. Ernie blinked hard. Matthew stepped forward, voice firm but full of emotion. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't expect applause. But that's exactly why you deserve it. He gestured toward the car. This is yours. Paid in full. Maintenance covered. Fuel. Stipend included. You never have to worry about getting to work again. The room clapped, but Matthew wasn't done. And there's more, he said, turning to Lena. You said you wanted to be a teacher, right? Lena nodded slowly, tears already filling her eyes. We've set up a full scholarship in your name. Tuition, books, everything, wherever you choose to go, because no young woman should ever wonder if she's allowed to dream. Lena gasped quietly and covered her mouth. Ernie placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, blinking fast. His knees wobbled slightly, and for a moment, he looked like he might fall, not from weakness, but from disbelief. I don't know what to say, Ernie whispered. Matthew stepped closer. You don't have to say anything. You've already said everything that matters. Every night, with every delivery, every cookie, every kind word. You reminded us what service really looks like. That night wasn't about pizza. It was about something far greater. The power of unnoticed people doing unforgettable things. Quietly, humbly, and with love. But the story didn't stop there. 3 months later, Brickfire had rolled out a new internal program called The Names We Don't Forget. A handwritten letter from Matthew himself sent every month to one employee nominated by peers for kindness that went beyond policy. Not for speed, not for upselling, but for humanity. In hundreds of stores across the country, photos of these employees began appearing on what came to be called the Wall of Real Ones. At the bottom of each plaque, engraved in small letters, was a quote from Ernie's napkin. Note: Hope your evening is warm and full of good things. As for Ernie, he eventually stepped back from delivery runs, but he didn't retire completely. Matthew offered him a new title, Cultural Ambassador, a gentle way of saying, you're the heartbeat now. He visited stores, gave small talks, spoke to new hires about what kindness really looks like when no one is watching. Lena, now a freshman at a top university, would call him after class and tell him which professors reminded her of him. And, sometimes on quiet mornings, Ernie would still bake cookies, not for tips, not for policies, just for people. Because sometimes the smallest bag carries the biggest gift. And sometimes the delivery isn't pizza, it's perspective. If this story moved you like it moved us, don't forget to share it with someone who still believes in kindness, and hit that subscribe button, because we've got more real stories about real people that just might restore your faith in the world.